Now that you're beginning to get into the details of creating your slide deck with your companion narration, I want to remind you about the 5 competencies that are included in the textbook. This is going to be just a highlight of how you might apply those competencies for this assignment. I encourage you to spend some time going through the textbook and looking for opportunities to make sure that you're applying each of these competencies in some way as you prepare your slide deck. So we've talked about already in a different presentation some of the visual ideas on creating your slide deck, and by now you should have watched Death by PowerPoint, which is really helpful, I think, in the things to do and not to do in creating your slides. But we now want to bring this all together to make sure that your slides and your narration work together to deliver your final report on the project that you proposed, that you updated, and now you're going to give a final report on. So let's talk about how you can apply some of the competencies in the textbook to this assignment. All right, so first of all, the first competency is professional, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of these. I'll also mention that you probably noticed on the first slide I got a little bit cute with the picture of the deck of a boat, referring to slide deck. You don't want to be too clever in a presentation of this sort. Yes, it's fine to cause a smile. It's okay to have a little bit of comic relief, as it were, but you don't want to get goofy. So when in doubt, take the more conservative path when you are communicating to business people. So first of all, you want to start with 2 things. Remember who your audience is. You've described your audience now a couple of times in these assignments. Remember who they are and make sure that your messaging is geared for that audience. And as with many things in business and in life, you start with your destination and work backward from there. Where do you want people to end up? Where do you want your audience to end up? And then work backward on how you're going to take them there. So this seems like an obvious approach, but it's amazing to me how few times this really happens, where I will be talking to someone about an assignment or about a project, and I'll eventually ask, okay, what's the result you're aiming for? Where's the destination? And it's interesting how often that's when the light goes on. Oh, yeah, let's start with that, and now let's work backward rather than starting at the starting line and going forward. Start at the finish line and work your way back. And that's how you build your final report for this class. Another of the competencies that the textbook talks about is being clear in your communication. This too it seems like it's obvious, but it's amazing to me how often people get muddled in their communication. They don't use the right words, or they use too many words, or what have you. So a couple of specific thoughts about being clear for this assignment. When in doubt, go straight ahead. So sometimes we kind of weave our way through our communication. Again, we start with what's the destination and work our way backward in a straight line as much as we possibly can, adding only that information that's necessary. Start with your best stuff. So I often talk about, in my days as a journalist, we would teach reporters to use what we call the inverted pyramid. Put the most important stuff at the top of the story, so an upside down triangle basically, and then work your way back through to the less important stuff. Make sure that you're leading with your best stuff. This is the opposite of what the internet often does. And so a lot of us are becoming accustomed to, we open a clickbait link, and because the provider wants us to spend a lot of time on their site and they want us to weave through a number of pages, they have 7 paragraphs, 10 paragraphs of background before they get to, if they ever do, the point that brought you there in the first place. That is not how we do this. Go with your best stuff. And remember, the slides are not intended to replicate your narration. They are intended to supplement. So you just don't put all of your words on the slides and then read them. That is death by PowerPoint. You want your slides. I've tried to use these slides for this lesson as an example. Simple, easy. They're reinforcing the basic messages, and that's it. Being concise, again, often is a lost art, so you want to, in some fashion, have an executive summary. You can lead with it, probably best to lead with it. You can also then close with it in some fashion. You don't want to just repeat it, but you want a nice, strong, clear, concise, to the point beginning. In English composition, when you're writing an essay for a college class, we call this a thesis statement. That's kind of all an executive summary is maybe an expanded version of a thesis statement. So think of it that way. If information isn't clearly relevant, don't include it. Move on to the next thing. Stick to what matters most. And don't keep going back over stuff. Once you've made a point, move on to the next one. Don't rehash the same information over and over again. Again, this happens more than you think. You probably observe it when you watch presentations or in real life. We tend to do this. Don't do it for this assignment. Remember that this is all evidence-driven, and so you want to rely on good data. Now, I know we're mythologizing this a little bit, so in some cases you're making this up, but don't make up crazy stuff. Use plausible and, where you can, real data, real sources, real experts to support your report. And I've added an example here of a chart, a very basic chart that you can, this kind of thing that you can use. I created this in Excel in about 45 seconds. There are lessons, easy lessons, that you can go on to YouTube and learn how to do this. It's very, very easy. Here's one of the things about plausibility, though. If you look at this chart, make sure, if this is what you're trying to sell, that you're going to see sales growth of this amount, make sure that you've made your case, that you've got enough evidence to support these big numbers. Because the first thing I would say as a CEO is the best predictor of future performance is recent history. And so unless you are going to do something significantly different than what's been done, I don't buy this. And so use data, rely on experts, be specific, be plausible. Persuasive does not mean obnoxious or threatening or otherwise disagreeable, but you do want to be persuasive at the end of the day, and you want your report to be persuasive and to arrive at a place where you've made your case. You have delivered on the requirements that the assignment has, and your audience is going to be convinced. So again, go back and recall the lessons you've had in other courses on the Greek approach to persuasion, logos, ethos, pathos, kairos. There's plenty of stuff available to you to refresh your memory on that. Now, I understand we're being kind of mythical in our approach here, but you want this to have the air of truth. You want to be truthful in everything that you do in business communication and business writing. So your presentation needs to have that sense of truth to it. So when you're preparing this final assignment, you're going to create 7 to 10 slides, and you're going to create a narrative that will go with each of them. And so your narrative will need to be matched to each of the slides. Do not put your narrative on the slides. This is an example of about how far to go. Now you can use images and other things, but don't pack your slides full of stuff. Most of the information is going to be delivered in the narrative. That can be submitted as a written narrative, just as you've used the written word for your first 2 main assignments. If you want 5 extra points, you can actually record the narrative and attach it, or even save it as an MP4 like I do with these PowerPoint-based lessons. If you want to do that and you're not quite sure how to go about it, I'm happy to Zoom with you and we can have a chat about how to go about that. It's not difficult. You will not ever be penalized because your delivery isn't necessarily perfect, because this is not a speech class. It's a business writing and communication class. But if you want to give that a try, I've had students do it, and I think they are usually surprised at how well it goes. But the main requirement is submit your written narration and make it clear how it goes with each of the slides. So any questions as you begin to put the final touches on this assignment, let me know and we can have a chat before you make your final submission.